6:35. Fighting on the front line in Ukraine, though we're not talking very much about it at the moment, remains brutal and relentless. And winter is coming, which makes everything far worse. One man who knows just how much worse is Shaun Pinner, the former British soldier who fought for Ukraine, was captured and tortured by the Russians, and then returned in a prisoner deal negotiated by Roman Abramovich. He's told his story in a remarkable new book called Live, Fight, Survive.
I joined the Ukraine military for ever since I went there in 2018. I'd left the British Army. I'd had 9 years with the Royal Anglian Regiment. I'd had 15 years in waste management, hazardous waste management, and run my own business. But I was really looking for a sense of belonging. I wasn't happy doing the 16-hour commute in and the journeys around the M25. And I'd already come out of a 9-year relationship. And I was really wanted to go back to set to default some of the happiest times I'd ever had. It was just with
a classic midlife crisis.
Well, yeah, probably the second and third one, to be fair.
So you decide you have this long military career before you, and you're in Northern Ireland, and you did lots of extraordinary things there, and you were in the Balkans as well. But you go and become what has to be called a mercenary, fighting against ISIS, the ultimate bad guys, I guess.
Well, we weren't paid. Firstly, so we're not mercenaries, we were volunteers.
Right.
It was a sense of belonging, it was doing something good. The Kurds even called it a women's revolution, so, it was something that we could get behind. And I had friends working over there already. And it was some 8 months seeing a culture, an area of the world that I probably wouldn't have seen if I hadn't gone. I certainly wouldn't recommend it as a career choice for everybody, but it was something I knew about. I joined the army from 17, so I didn't have those transferable skills that you could then work abroad and use those skills to then find a new way of life. Let's say working in IT. I'd been in the army for 9 years. It was something I knew something about, and we were giving something back.
Yeah, well, you had a transferable skill of one kind, I would have thought. But when you were fighting ISIS, you found that the people you were fighting alongside, quite a mixed bag, some quite extreme people, and you weren't happy there really either. You wanted another change.
No, I was happy with some of the guys, and they just happened to be all military. But it attracted quite a lot of varied characters, from very religious to very political, in all different spectrums. And there was a lot of internal squabbling and internal fighting, and I didn't really like that. I missed the structure, but it was a very good 8 months, and I learned a culture, I never looked back.
So you go to Ukraine before the war proper has started, but when there's an awful lot of trouble on the border between Ukraine and Russia and around that area, and the breakaway republics, and you train Ukrainian forces for quite a long time as somebody who's got transferable skills.
Absolutely, yeah. I went to Mariupol after an invite from a friend. He was an engineer, a sapper working in Mariupol, demining. Said, we're looking for Western instructors, and I was 50-50. I knew what the Russians were capable of, but I'd spent 9 years learning how to fight them. So I went over to Mariupol, fell in love with the city, fell in love with my wife, didn't go home for 5 years after that. I absolutely loved it.
And it seems a strange thing to say now, but life in Mariupol was sweet.
It was beautiful. It's a beautiful city. It was a beautiful city. It was on the Azov Sea. The lifestyle was very relaxed.
Beaches, barbecues,
shashlik. Yeah. It was amazing. And I was doing a job I loved. I just absolutely loved it.
But then, of course, the war starts, the Russian invasion begins, and you have some extraordinary descriptions in this book of what it's actually like to be in a trench, fighting in the winter, on the front line against the Russians. Terrifying, but also incredibly cold, and you're always hungry, or almost always.
Always hungry. That's the key. The logistics was very bad. So you lived off the land first, and then you built the positions, and then you fought from those positions. Like I said, it was minus 28 in the most extreme circumstances, where you just flash froze the minute you come out the warmth and the blindage. You were treading through trenches that are knee deep in mud, and when it rains, you're constantly bayoning out the trenches. It's like what you see in World War I. It's Somme type environment.
And bitter cold. There's one point you look down at your rifle and you think somebody has played a practical joke on you.
Yeah, just flash froze, absolutely white as anything.
And it had been painted white, but it was just frozen.
Just frozen, yeah, absolutely frozen.
And the demoralising effect of not having enough to eat is something I think probably people here don't really think about when they're...
No, certainly in captivity, it's the worst form of torture. I tell people that all the time. The pain, it really is short. As long as you can get through that. I mean, nobody can train you for pain. But the starvation is with you every day. They're using it as a tool to drive a wedge between you and the other prisoners. Some days they'll give some people more, some people less. They want that conflict. Your energy levels are either high or really, really low. And it affects your mood. Sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're elated for some reason, bursts of energy, and then you're back to thinking about food 24 hours a day.
Let's just go back to before you're captured, because you see a lot of people die. You see shells and tank shells landing all around you and shaking the ground around you. It's terrifying. Mm-hmm. But the fighting goes on, and you are finally captured while you're by yourself trying to get to a new position.
Well, we were ambushed. On the way out, it was decided that we were going to join up with another unit. And on the way out, we were ambushed. We managed to get some video footage of the rockets and the ambush, and pictures of us actually breaking the ambush and breaking away from the vehicles. And it was dark at the time, so we got separated. And then the start of the escape and evasion really starts there. I lost my platoon. I was helping injured. Made a decision because I was really didn't suffer any injuries. I was still fully armed, and I followed orders to try and find my platoon. When I couldn't find my platoon, I had to make a decision whether to start working my way to friendly lines, Zaporizhzhia. And I got 2 hours outside Mariupol when I was captured.
And at that point, the game was up. Did they know that you were British immediately?
Yeah, I pre-planned it, part of my SEER training before. Survival, escape, resist and evade training. I'd had some 30 years before. I was drawing on that experience, so I'd planned to, if I got captured or cornered, that I would find a Russian unit, a Russian officer, because I didn't want to surrender to the DPR, the Donetsk People's Republic, no plan survives first contact. It just all went wrong from the ambush. It was one of the brightest days and sunniest days that we'd had in that time. The day before it was foggy, perfect day to get out, but unfortunately from the word go, it was against us.
So again, you're a victim of the weather in a sense.
Yeah.
And pretty much immediately you're tortured, you're stabbed, you're electrocuted. Did you think reasonably early on, I'm not going to get out of this alive?
Plenty of times, but that was from day one. The shock and awe on the first day of the invasion, I'd come to terms with that. My call to my mum saying, you don't have to stay there. I'd made that choice quite a few times before I'd got to that point. And then the death of Dima, my friend. You just got to keep going. You can't run away from it. You just got to keep going. And that drive to get out, of course, when I was taken, I was handed over from the DPR, who captured me, to Russian regulars, who then tortured me, electrocuted me on the fingers and stabbed me in the leg to stop me running away. And the beatings got worse, tasers, more beatings. Before then, I was taken to Donetsk.
Mm. And you've called your book Live, Fight, Survive. Expletives deleted. Just explain to people listening why you've called it that.
One of the last calls I made was to my wife. If the Saturn and Pluto aligned and the wind was right, there was a spot where we could get a signal out. And I rang my wife and just said it's all over. I had no idea at the time Zelensky had said that you negotiate surrender or try and get back to friendly lines. But my wife just started shouting at me on the phone saying, "You brought the world's attention to Mariupol. You are all warriors, you're all fighting. Tell the guys they're doing an amazing job. Just survive, live, keep living." And that mantra, live, fight, survive, just kept going through my head at the darkest times.
And now you're back there. You're back in Ukraine, where you settled. But you must be thinking about the soldiers on the front line now. It appears that they may have broken through part of the Russian defences at the centre of the front line, but that winter is not that far off. And it's approaching, and the horrific conditions that you describe in this book are coming back to those people now. Just tell us your thoughts about the guys on the front line now. Obviously,
I've got every faith in the Ukrainians. They've been underestimated from day one. A few of the guys were training over there before the full-scale invasion, and we were saying, don't underestimate Ukrainians. We'll give them a bloody nose, is what I said on the media. I have no problems in thinking that they will continue their offensive through the winter. They know the ground better. They're better at dealing with their own weather, and they're in their own back garden. So I have no problems with the Ukrainians. They're very good at what they do. and I will stick by that. I don't doubt for 1 minute they'll continue the offences through the winter.
And you were got out of your terrible situation by Roman Abramovich. You were brought out back to the West. To a lot of people, it'll seem surprising that after all of that, you're going back to Ukraine again.
My wife's an NGO. She works with refugees. It was my home since 2018. Part of the closure I had was going back and seeing my friends that had been exchanged. It's a big part of the closure. And obviously writing a book was a big part of therapeutic and a big part of the closure behind that. I'm very much still go back. I've just left Dnipro, and my home's in Dnipro. We've had to move location because of the rockets to a bit of a safer area. But it's still fighting the war. There's still stories to be told about this war.
Shaun Pinner, a remarkable story from the front line. Thank you very much for coming to talk to LBC.
Thank you. My pleasure.
6:45. This is the calm before the storm at Westminster, where it feels rather empty ahead of the party conferences, which could, of course, be the last before the next general election will be. What should we expect? We will discuss with my weekly panel of political boffins next, 6:46.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Rishi Sunak refuses to confirm that the Manchester leg of HS2 will be built. That's because it won't be, will it?
Ian Dale on LBC.